Welcome to our learning episode on correspondence. Allow me to share my screen. Okay, now we will be discussing about correspondence referring to text messages, emails, memos, and letters. These correspondence are the ones that we are using daily, especially text messages and emails. However, memos and letters are also become available daily, but they most of the time they are done online. Let us say through email. Memos and letters are sent through emails, or to disseminate information we are using text messages, or at sometimes we are using different social media platforms like um, Facebook Messenger or Facebook Workplace or Yammer or any other platform that is available online. At present, At present, since we have all of these developments in our workplaces, like the availability of online connectivity, that's why we have to also observe netiquette. And what do we mean by netiquette? Netiquette is something that we have to be considered every time we are online, every time we are doing something online, because this is something that we cannot retract. This is something that we cannot um, easily forget or easily, in a sense, easily erase. Now, what are the guidelines in communicating online? We have several guidelines and we have several items to be considered. We actually have five. Number one, we have to know the context. We have to really know the context. We have to get to know the topic. We have to clarify things. We have to know what do we mean, what do these people mean. We have to look at situation so we can respond properly. Second, we have to remember the human or the human nature of every individual. We have to make sure that we understand that every individual has feelings like us, and we have to remember that we have also to protect other people more than protecting ourselves. In that case, we have to make sure that integrity is still intact in us, so we will not try to destroy anyone or any organization for the sake of a compliment or for the sake of getting the advantage. Third is we have to recognize that the text is permanent, right? May it be online or otherwise, whatever message that is, that remains to be there until such time everything else is okay, or until such time we have already clarified things. But the point is, it has already been done, it has already been made. Fourth item is we have to research before we react. That's why, remember, number one, we have to get to know the context. We have to get to know everything else. We have to clarify things already. I mean, supposed to be on the very first place. We have to look at situation. And so we are saying in this fourth item that we have to do our part. We have to do our homework. And our homework is to research. So we know what to say. We know what's the proper thing to do. And then the last, we have to respect the privacy. And we have to always acknowledge original ideas. And we should not claim them. We should not claim them. We have to acknowledge the efforts of other individuals, also saying that this particular work is attributed to this individual. At that point, we are not owning something that is not ours. Okay, these are the guidelines on communicating online. We have to always remember these five items. But when you try to look at this, these five items can always be summed up with one quotation that I will never ever forget. I would always say our head must be above waters. Whatever we read online, we have to remember that we shall not be driven by emotions, but we have to be driven by objectivity. We have to be driven by what is true and what is factuals. What is the thing that the documents are saying? What is the thing that agencies are saying? And that is something that we need to focus, because for example, nowadays a lot of fake news is going on in the online world, and everyone gets affected and everyone are misleading, and that's something that we are not advocating with. That is something that we have to stop. That's why we have to observe, these particular guidelines. Now, there are also guidelines for effective business texting. Again, texting is supposed to be done with measures, or texting is supposed to be done with a purpose. In the case of business texting, that means we have to look at texting or SMS as something beneficial, not only to us individually, but to our organization. It is an advantage that we have to maximize. It is a strength that we have to sustain, and we have to grow. Let it grow. Now, there are three items that we have to look at. Number one, we have to know your recipient. I guess this is very basic for every business correspondence, regardless of what form or mode it may be. We have to know our recipient. We have to know the name. We have to know where this person works. We have to know the designation of this individual in that particular in a particular institution. Or in a sense, we have to look at also his personality beyond the organization, because we have to remember, we need to have personal connection with this individual. Second item, we have to anticipate an intentional misinterpretation. Misinterpretation is definitely probable. It is probable in every business communication, regardless if that's traditional, conventional, or in a platform like SMS, text messaging, social media, emails, etc., online, in a sense. No, misinterpretation is something probable, is something possible, simply because we are only communicating through words. We are communicating only with with without personal touch. We are communicating without personal interaction, and so that can definitely lead at some point, sometimes, to miscommunication. That's why we have to be very careful with the words that we are saying. We have to be very careful with the choice of words. We have to be very careful with even with our sentence constructions, and we have to be very careful with punctuation marks, capitalization, and everything else, because those would mean so much. We have to remember that non-verbal responses like those are the ones make sense rather than verbal responses. And then lastly, we have to make sure we are using text messaging as appropriately as possible. We have to maximize it. That's true, that's correct, but we have to make sure we are using it appropriately. We are using it in a purpose. That means, for example, we shall not be sending text messages beyond working hours. Otherwise, you are really close friends, and you are talking something not related to work, then that's possible. But if it is something related to work, then I don't think, and I do not actually encourage, that you have to message an individual about work beyond working hours. Otherwise, it is an emergency. Otherwise, it's about a matter of life and death of an organization, then that's possible. But if it's not within that particular nature, then you have to avoid that. You have to schedule sending the text messages within the working hours, immediately on the following day. Now, these are the three guidelines that we have to look at in sending business SMS. Okay. Next item. These are now the guidelines for effective business emails. Again, we have to say business emails. Probably later on we can have discussion on effective business letter writing. But at this point, our focus only is about business emails. Now, number one, We have to remember that we need to use proper salutation. The word honorable is exclusive only to those who are elected officials and appointed public officials, elected public officials and appointed public officials. Okay, so we are not supposed to use honorable to anyone, to anybody. Okay, next we have to make sure that our letter is clear, our letter is brief. And of course, you have to remember, for every email that you are supposed to send, it requires a subject line. And a subject line must be clear, similar to the content itself, must be brief, similar to the content in itself, and of course, must also be specific. Third item, we have to avoid abbreviation. We have to acknowledge the fact that not everyone can be using the same or will have the same set of words or set of abbreviation the same as what we have. So we have to spell them out on the first hand, and then we have to show them how it is abbreviated, and then we can use abbreviation as we go on into the letter and into the communication. Fourth item, we have to use a good format. You have to use a good format of the letter. Okay, in general, most of business letters in most of the business letters in emails are in full block format. So you start, let us say, with dear President blank, and then you immediately, after a space, then you immediately go on with your letter. Fifth item, this is something that's really important, because again, when you go back to the previous guidelines on online communication, text is already permanent. You cannot delete it once you send it. So we have, before you click the send button, you have to reread the file, you have to revise the file, you have to review the file. That means when you are done with all of these 3 steps, then that's the time you can send the email. Next item, we have to reply promptly. When we say promptly, we have to reply not only in a very timely manner, but we have to reply with an appropriate response, with a response that would not give another question, but would give an answer to a question. Next item, we have to use reply all sparingly. Only reply to an individual who's supposed to receive your message. And we have to avoid using all capitalization letters, capitalized letters. I mean, we should not be using that most of the time in all cases, if not most of the time in every emails. We have to observe timeliness. We have to observe timeliness. That means if our email is expected at 12 noon, we have to make sure we prepare the message already before 12 noon. We have attached already files, especially if the files are too big or too large. We have to attach them so we can send it on time, like 30 minutes, 1 hour before the deadline. And then next is second to the last, we have to make sure that make sure that we can give feedback or follow up even though we are not asked about it. We have to make sure that they are getting informed about the developments, let's say, of a certain agreement that both organizations have, since you are the secretariat. But that's only a presumption, okay? And then the last item is we have to make sure we affix our name in every email. We affix our name in every email, so so people would know, I mean, the recipient would know that this letter is really coming from you, though there is already an email address, but an email address would not mean it is personally sent by you. Okay, so you have to make sure that you have your name affixed in your email. So these are the guidelines for effective business emails. Next, we'll be talking about memorandum. Okay, memorandum is something that is supposed to be within an organization. Let us say if you are working, let us say in a bank. Let us say you're working in a bank and you're supposed to write a letter to a specific unit of the bank requesting, let us say, for a document. You must not be using any other form of business communication but a memorandum type, because memorandum is an in-house communication. It doesn't mean anything else. Like it's supposed not to have a bad meaning, like It can, I mean, memorandum, it can only be served to individuals who are delinquent or who did something wrong. No, memorandum is supposed to inform everyone, to request everyone, to cover, I mean, to be used as somehow a cover letter to a proposal or something. No, and a memorandum is divided. A memorandum is divided into three major parts. Number one, you have a letterhead, which is usual. You have a letterhead, which is usual. Second, you have a header block. Header block is this part. This part is the header block where you can see to, from, date, subject, and re. Now, when it comes to the word to and for, because sometimes you could be able to observe that there are memorandums that are to, there are memorandums that are using, sorry, that are using forms. To is used specifically for memoranda that are addressed to inferior or subordinates in an organization. However, memorandum using for is used only for memorandum addressed to superiors. Let us say I am like just an officer in a multinational company or organization. I need to write, let us say, an in-house letter addressed to the chairman of the organization. So I have to use for. However, if the chairman responds to my letter, if the chairman will respond to my letter, then the chairman's supposed to use to. Okay, supposed to use to. Then you have from, definitely where the letters came from. That will mean where the letter or where the memorandum came from. I mean, come from. And then you have the date. It's a full date. It's a full date. You have to spell the month out. You must not be using numbers here. And then and then you have subject or most of the memorandum, especially in the government, are using re. But we have to remember that re is something obsolete. That means if we can just stop using re and start using subject, then we have to use the word, I mean, subject here, no, because re is too old already, too obsolete. Now, after having the header block, we have to look at now the message in itself. The message has three parts: introduction, body, and conclusion. We have an opening. We have to look at the details, and we have to close it. No, we have to close it. When we say opening, you have to give them the context. You have to give them the context. You have to give them a glimpse of what it is about. And then right after that, you have to give them the entire details of everything else. And then the last item, you have to close it with supposed to be, let us say, an instruction or an expectation of an action that's supposed to be made by the recipient of the letter, of the memorandum. Okay. Now, next item, we have to look at business letters here. When you say business letters, they're supposed to be sent, supposed to be sent through emails. We have to remember that we have to fill everything else necessary. Where supposed to be sent. Of course, a subject line is necessary. When CC is required, you have also to CC the file to those who must have the copy of the file. And BCC when necessary, also blind carbon copy notation. Now, on this side, if you can observe, these are the parts of a business letter conventional type. That means business letter that are not sent through email. So you have here inside address, the date, the recipient's address, salutation, the entire message, your closing and then or signature block. Then you have your enclosures if the letter is enclosed with some other documents. But in this case, since this is done online, we are only looking at purpose of letter, since we're done discussing with the format of every email sent. No, now we are to look at transmittal letters, letters of inquiry, and follow-up letters. These letters are for a purpose. These letters are for a purpose. Transmittal letter is used only like a cover letter, for a document sent from one organization to another, from one office to another. Like you are endorsing this set of documents, or you're endorsing, let us say, a particular file, to another office. That's what you call transmittal letters. Letters of inquiry is if you are asking or if you're asking for details of of an individual, or details, let us say, or development, let us say, of a particular project. And then the last is follow-up letters. Now, follow-up letters, if you're asking, let us say, of feedback, or you're asking, let us say, of, again, development of a particular something. But we have to remember, regardless of the letter, we have to observe that the letter must be concise. Concise means the letter must be using less words as possible, but you have to, without sacrificing the meaning of the letter. Second, complete. All necessary details must be there, must be complete. Second, clear. It must be clear. That means there must be no um, questions to be asked by the recipient. And then it must be correct. Grammar must be properly observed, which we can have discussion later on about grammar and mechanics. All punctuations must be properly observed. Also, we have to look at courtesy. Also, you have to observe courtesy, like you need to understand the feeling of the one who shall receive the letter. You have to be very mindful of that. And then it must be concrete. I mean, that concrete, that means we must be using words that are true. We must be using words that are less abstract or not abstract at all. Less abstract or not abstract at all. Now, those are the C's. We call that the C's. Now, the C's of effective business communications, and those are also applicable in business letters to be sent online. Now, that's the end of our discussion in terms of correspondence, text messages, emails, memos, and letters. If you have questions, kindly send me an email to these email addresses. Again, thank you very much, and see you in our next learning episode.